All right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 201. It's Tuesday night. This is when we like to talk to you about everything that's going on here in college football. My name is Bobak Ha'Eri. I'm your host every Tuesday night as we take your calls. I'm going to go ahead and add a quick piece of information and a reply on how you can join the conversation using the Twitter app or the X app. Just have to hit request in the bottom left. And on Tuesday, there we go. And on Tuesday nights, we are here just to listen to whatever it is you want to hear about college football and kind of go over the week's kind of news and events. There's been a lot going on. I mean, even though it's a summer, we're in the midst of the madness that is media days, which are not necessarily where you go for breaking news, but a lot of stuff happens around it. All the coaches are and the commissioners are giving us what to expect for this season. We already had the Big 12. We already had the Mountain West. We had Beavs and Cougs After Dark, which we sent a reporter to, and actually, a couple of my friends who also are reporters were at that particular event in the Bellagio. And SEC Media Days are going on right now. They are slow. I don't think people who cover the sport necessarily like how long it's gotten because there's so few teams on each day. And then I was told, like, when Vanderbilt got up on the first day, they were at the end of the day. Most of the media had already left. But if you'd like to join the conversation, please hit request. I see Ski Masks Murphy wants to join us. I'm going to go ahead and let him up. Um, just a couple of quick news and notes. I always like to note the passing of people who I think had some notoriety and importance. Monte Kiffin, father of course, Lane Kiffin, but also a successful coach in his own right, especially as a defensive coordinator. Obviously, the Tampa 2 is heavily associated with him. Briefly, the head coach of NC State, although he did it for 3 seasons and then never really wanted to be head coach again. Obviously, he's coached at places his son Lane has coached before, and obviously he's got more than just Lane. He's got a couple of other kids as well, and I believe Chris Kiffin is also a solid coach in his own right. But he passed at 84, peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family, and that had to be tough because only a few days later. Because of course they schedule these things in advance. Lane had to go and be part of the first day of SEC Media Days yesterday. So again, our thoughts are with him. Another thing. This isn't I don't want to call this a tragedy because obviously we just talked about someone passing away, but without much surprise, Jeff Tedford has officially stepped down as the head coach of Fresno State. In case you missed that, it was not to be unexpected for those who were not necessarily following his career. He stepped down from Fresno State in 2019 for health reasons, and then they hired a coach named Kalen DeBoer. We all know how that went. He was already a great coach, but my goodness, did he use that for all it was worth? So then when DeBoer left for Washington, Jeff Tedford stepped back up. Of course, he stepped down briefly at the end of last season to miss the bowl game for medical reasons and came back. I was actually surprised he came back. And then here we go. He's stepped down not long after media days. I think the word was already out only because I went back because, he resigned 2 days ago. Stepped down medically. Again, as far as we know, he's okay. It's just probably family stress. He just decided he needed to do that. We've seen coaches do that. Jerry Kill did it twice at Minnesota and at New Mexico State. Joe Moglia, I've talked to the guy several times. Brilliant man. I've talked to him since he resigned. He just decided, you know what, my health was just getting too far gone. I just did it for myself. And hopefully Jeff Tedford lives a long, healthy life now. And he certainly is set up to do it. But I think the word was out only because if you look back at some of the quotes from Mountain West Media Day, Air Force head coach Troy Calhoun said, nobody's had more influence on West Coast football this century than Jeff Tedford, which you could definitely make that argument with some of the stops he's had. But at the same time, that's like a pronouncement of a guy's career. And a few days later, he resigns for medical reasons. So I think the cat was quietly out of the bag and probably some respect from some of his colleagues on letting him decide to make that call when he wanted. Just a couple of other quick notes. ESPN had some great images from the construction of Northwestern's temporary stadium on Lake Michigan. Basically, they've boosted up their existing lacrosse field into a 15,000 seat stadium for the next 2 years while they totally rebuild Ryan Field. And it has been fascinating. Like this thing, the renderings of it, it's going to be completely exposed to the lake on one of the long sides of the field. And basically, most of the fans are going to be in the end zones, or above the end zones. It is going to be fantastic. I cannot wait to see what kind of wind they get in the Windy City for some of these games. It's going to be a kicker's nightmare. Of course, they are putting their two biggest home games in Wrigley Field. So they're going to be hosting, I believe, this year it's Ohio State, and the rivalry game with Illinois are going to be at Wrigley. But for the other games, game on. This is going to be absolutely fantastic. I hope I hope this goes as wild as it could go. And speaking of stadiums, and fan antics, Colombia and Argentina, man, did they just like prove every fan in the United States like there's a way you can step things up? You thought you were crazy? No, no, no. We're gonna climb over fences. We're gonna like go through the HVAC ducts. I think I saw somebody did a Photoshop of John McClane in Die Hard with one of like a Columbia hat on. I was waiting to find out that the Columbia fans sneaking in were actually the Uruguay players who had run into the stands to fight the Columbia fans, in their game, and they decided to climb in and finish the job and pick a fight. All I know is that it's just fun to see the responses. College football fans everywhere are like, wow. I mean, my favorite. Then again, this Alabama fan, Ego Spartan, he said, like, well, in our defense, most of us wouldn't fit. Um, but I don't know. I haven't seen any Miami fans racing the break in the Hard Rock Stadium. Usually, they're just I think they just leave the doors open and hope people show up for some of those games. But I'm gonna set all that stuff aside. Ski Masks, Murphy, how are you?
I am doing great. I mean, you covered a decent amount of topics I was going to try to start out with. Well, most importantly, RIP to Monte Kiffin. Most remembered for, the Tampa 2 defense with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the late 90s, early 2000s. But a lot of people forget that he is also two-time national champion as a defensive coordinator as well, because he built those Nebraska defenses back in the 70s. So you gotta say RIP. It's one of the greats. And also keeping it in topic with the changing of the guard, losing a great to death, but also having Nick Saban step down as head coach. At SEC Media Day, apparently,
Yes.
out of all the crazy things you could think could happen, Nick Saban's there, and a person comes up to him who knows exactly who he is and says, Coach Saban, you need to come and get media credentials to be in here. That has to at least be like one of the top 10 craziest things to think of. But it's like, it's SEC Media Day. Nick Saban should not need media credentials. Just let him inside. We know no one else looks like him. He doesn't have a doppelganger. He's one of one. And he also looks like he's been getting younger since he stopped coaching. So we know he really took coaching to the extreme. But asking for media credentials is hilarious.
It was. That was absolutely great. That was probably the most amusing thing that happened. Because you said, you even said, like, I just was used to walking in all these years and no one ever asking me. And yeah, there you go. Although he dutifully did. I mean, now he's happily a member of the media. And I can't wait to see how they use him on game day. In this upcoming season. I think a lot of people are interested to see how that works. But yeah, and then it was really interesting. I just wanted that brings up. I had one thing also related to Saban. The Max Olson and Bruce Feldman over the Athletic had a really interesting article where they tracked down way beyond what most people had tracked down, sort of the employment butterfly effect for Nick Saban, and they tracked down 400 over 400 coaches, staffers, assistants, and all the people that were affected by Nick Saban's move and the shuffle to kind of take spot. Some people were a handful of people retired from coaching, but it went all the way down to like some high schools. They talked to a guy who became a JUCO head coach at some community college, and he didn't realize until they told him, like, no, the reason you have this job is Nick Saban got hired away. It was a fun thing to read, but also just kind of underlined the impact he had. John, how are you doing? And I see we have a couple other people who want to join us. I'll let you all up as well.
Hey, sorry, I was middle eating a sandwich.
No worries.
Didn't expect to call this early. Hey, what's going on, man?
Good, good. It is absolutely nice to be talking college football, and it gets more exciting each week of the summer that passes because we're closer and closer to the beginning of the season.
Yeah, a lot of big news happening this week. A lot of big moments. I think the biggest moment no one's talking about, though, Sonic is now the fast food partner for the SEC. The news that people need to know, man. No, but I'm kidding. That's real news. But I am more curious about your thoughts about the report that came out today regarding Florida State and Clemson, which might be the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. Because I don't know if anyone else didn't see. Essentially, there's reports saying that SEC and the Big Ten don't want Florida State. One of the reasons being that they feel like they're too flaky, that their behavior in the last several years makes them hesitant to put them in, which kind
I
of
think
funny.
the quote that I loved was they've been a disruptive partner, which is
Yes.
yeah.
The whole idea of them desperately trying to leave the ACC and then the conference saying, you know what, we don't want your mess here. Please don't come in. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I think the whole thing's hilarious, personally.
I'm skeptical highly because I mean people say that every time there's a potential candidate. I believe Greg Sankey even kind of said like we're happy with 16. You know, yeah, people reached out to us, but we're not interested. I mean, I'm sure hell, I bet Oregon State and Wazoo even reached out to Greg Sankey at one point to see, hey, SEC, you know, we're lovable. You know, I'm not sure, you know, but um, you know, it was funny too because there's another thing going on too, and I was told by someone whose opinion I strongly trust about what goes on in college football, especially behind the scenes, that Brett Yormark is certainly pushing that the Big 12 would be a home for Florida State and Clemson. I doubt right now that is the intention of either school, but I don't blame them for planting sources. I mean, like I believe one of the reports came out of one of the Arizona school sites, a Wildcat Authority, and they were on top of trying to figure out what was going on when the Pac-12 looked like it was about to break apart. So I'm not casting any disparations on them, but yeah, they apparently that seems to be the push from the Big 12 to say like, hey, if you're gonna find a place, if no one else is, if people are acting weird, you know, Big 12 will always welcome you, but I don't know. I'm kind of imagining that the the Clemson at BYU conference game doesn't quite match up in my head, but nothing does anymore. Who knows? I mean, this is one of those things where like if it comes apart and some teams end up in new places, all bets were off after USC and UCLA decided to join the Big Ten. So
Yeah, I will say at the end of the day, money talks. So
it does.
as much as the denials and everything we'll hear, at the end of the day, it really comes down what makes the most profit.
And I think that the one counter argument I've heard that makes sense in that vein is that because it came up, especially, we knew it was coming only because part of the reason the Pac 12 couldn't get a good media deal is the media deals are slowly drying up because terrestrial, AKA your plug in cable channels, are no longer earning the money they did because of the decade of cord cutting that's happened. And the thought was when the CFP media deal, just for the playoff games, was renewed, only ESPN bid on it. And they bid more than last time, but it wasn't the bidding war that some had expected. That perhaps is there a potential possibility that actually ESPN and Fox are kind of like, you know, we're pretty much maxed out on what we're willing to give you conferences at this point. Maybe we'll see where it goes from now, but I think that's the only credible thought I've heard that maybe why that might not happen. But everyone says that, and then when the actual candidates are there, boom, people act the way they do. Let's see here. I have a couple other people up here. I want to give them an opportunity. Kevin Slattery, you've been totally patient.
Oh,
What's
it's
on
all
your
good.
mind?
Yo, can you hear me? Just
Yeah,
want to
sure
double
can.
check. Dude, this is first off, like first time, long time, brother. Happy to call in. All right, so y'all were talking a little bit about conference realignment, right? Putting, finding a new home for FSU and Clemson. They make a little bit of sense in the Big 12 because they're trying to be a little bit more of a basketball conference now. But nonetheless, I digress. This isn't a basketball show. We got to talk about the biggest story in college football right now, which is, of course, the video game.
Yeah. Yep, I had some stuff ready to talk about the video game. Gosh, you can't live without it.
You gotta have it. So I'm not on the early access tip, but here's what
Hey,
I would like
I
from everybody.
brought a copy of the video game, except this is Bill Walsh College Football, the original.
It's a college football game. It's one that exists, and honestly, it's probably just as legal as NCAA 14. So that's exciting.
Well, yeah, I know. I can't wait to play my upcoming game of, let's see here, because I couldn't get any of the licenses. College Station 92 versus Tallahassee nine. I can't even tell what number that is. My 90. I think it's 92 as well. I think that was all the teams were from 92.
Yeah.
But anyway, so sorry, I didn't mean to say that. But yeah, so what are your thoughts on the game?
It's all good. Very excited for it to be out. It's one of the most realistic simulations of college football we've ever gotten. But I think there is one key piece of realism that we're missing, and it's one of my dream features, and I want to put it to you and everybody else. What is your most unrealistic feature that they could put in this game? Like, they've done a great job. They've done a phenomenal job, and hats off to the crew at EA for creating what seems to be an awesome game.
Well, the most unrealistic feature would be somehow getting a team like UMass.
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah. So NCAA 14. But mine is, I would love to see bowl games played in their actual locations. Like, I want to play the Pinstripe Bowl. I want to move the Pinstripe Bowl to a different MLB stadium. I want historic bowl games. Bring back the Gasparilla Bad Boy Mower Bowl. Bring back the Bitcoin Bowl. I'm a big proponent of weird bowl games. I would love to see ancient bowl games resurrected in the video game. And I'll hang up and listen and let y'all discuss.
Yeah, let's get the International Bowl back. We'll have a game in the Sky Dome in Toronto again. Why not? That's a great one. Oh my goodness, I see some hands up, but I just also. Well, okay, I'll let the hands up, and then I'll get to our friend here, CEO Aggie Guy 2019. I'll get to them, but John and Ski Mask, did you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I definitely. I feel if I have one unrealistic feature I could put in this game is I would put the Toast Bowl back in so I get revenge for Old Dominion. But I was gonna say, actually relate to that. Actually, Hawaii. I actually had a little bit of a gripe right now.
They do.
They did not get a updated stadium in the game, and Hawaii's actual Twitter account tweeted at it. But the thing is that doesn't make sense to me is Hawaii is the ones who were supposed to send the designs in. It's like, it was kind of weird saying, help us put the design in. I was like, it sounds like a guy like, help me with my homework. I'm like, it's overdue. Put your homework in, man.
Yeah, turn it. To be fair, they can just use the generic high school stadium, and that can be Hawaii's stadium for right now.
Yeah, so for those who are unaware, Hawaii apparently got given a generic stadium instead of to call it a temporary stadium is it is temporarily, technically a temporary stadium, the TC Ching complex on the campus of the University of Hawaii, because Aloha Stadium was condemned. They're going to they have to figure out, this is just a state of Hawaii kind of like, they've been for decades meaning to replace it or renovate it or something. So they basically moved out onto a converted track stadium that they've turned into their football stadium, which we've now been using as their home stadium for a few years. So TC Ching has not actually been put in the game. And yeah, that would explain it. I do know that even the AD for the University of Hawaii was tweeting at EA and all of that stuff. And I think there were a couple of other little tweaks. It sounds like EA has promised to patch Hawaii in the net, or at least do a patch for Hawaii and whatever other things. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of hiccups. Because there's just so much stuff here in college football land that I can see how they might have missed a few things on launch. But that was definitely one I didn't expect. Ski Mask Murphy, you wanted to add something?
I have the Golden Fleece in my hands.
Oh, you got a copy?
Yeah, I paid the extra money.
Oh boy, how is it?
Pure heroin in my veins, baby. It's great. It's great. It's so much better than Madden, and such a great update of the old games. The only way I could describe it is like they figured out how to take all the animations off their rails and make it almost physics based as possible. This will be animation based, but it's good. It's smooth. It's silky. For anyone who plays Madden and understands football and concepts, I will say this: a 50-50 ball on a go route is now an actual 50-50 ball. Is no longer an automatic pick for the defense. If both of them are stride and stride beside one another, it's truly a 50-50 ball. That's how much of an improvement the game is.
Can I ask a question about the kicking? Because
Oh,
it's
yeah,
so much harder now.
it is so
I
different.
love that.
It is so
That's
okay.
so good.
From someone who was a kicker in high school and tried for college, the two things they get right is that it's more difficult the further away you are, which is good, and then they make it more difficult if you're close and you're on the end hashes. Because in college and high school, the hash marks are wider than the goalposts. So trying to turn the ball into kick it is also difficult. So yeah, they've made it so you know probably anything past 40 yards is no longer a gimme. So that's great. But yeah, the stadium stuff is yeah, that's more so in the schools like John said because of they said only 80 schools, 80 of the 134 schools actually sent in
Hmm.
material. So I think Hawaii probably didn't send in the proper material because I think
I
Hawaii
could
was
see that.
trying. I believe Hawaii and Northwestern, both of them were trying to get renderings of their new stadiums to be in the game instead of what they have existing. Because
Oh,
I would have loved to see.
I
Because
hope
Northwestern, if
Northwestern
they,
gets a temporary stadium. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if Wrigley were somehow patched into the game?
yeah,
Right. That would be so dope. Especially too, you can only play in one end zone.
oh, the one
You
way,
got to drive the
That
same way the
infamous
whole
game.
the whole
Yeah.
game.
that would be great. But I know
Oh
that's a
man.
whole other situation because that's sort of outside of their licensing group right now as far as baseball stadiums. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, it's great. I haven't played at Northwestern because I believe Northwestern is still they have an old rendering of Ryan Field in the game. They
Mhm.
need to get this Lakeside Stadium in the game because I know that's just going to look beautiful in the game and in real life. And have some boats pull up to games in real life. We need that. We need it to look like the Monaco Grand Prix for Northwestern games. That's what we need. Just have all the boats and yachts pull up to watch the game. We
Like
need
have
it.
your shanked because a kicking game I've heard is pretty hard to have your shanked kick go into the lake. That would be fantastic. I hope we see at least one or two
The
balls.
splashdown effect.
Oh man, that would be
Oh,
fantastic. You know, oh, go ahead.
speaking of water features, because I'm trying to walk in the footsteps of John Harbaugh, so I'm starting my career at Western Kentucky as an OC. It's not going well. That's here nor
Mm.
there. But Arkansas State, they have the waterfalls and end zone, both of them are functioning, and the water actually flows. It's crazy that level of detail.
I remember that when they debuted those waterfalls, only because Arkansas State made a big deal about it. It was a probably midweek Sun Belt game, and they got absolutely shut out. It was like it was such an ugly game for them, and it was like they weren't a bad team that season. It's just that they totally didn't show up when they debuted those, which was a shame because it was such a cool idea of having waterfalls in the stadium. Reminds me of back when the Kansas City Royals had the waterworks that were part of that. Yeah, I want to be like we've been really patient here. CEO Aggie Guy 2019. What's on your mind?
Hey, I appreciate it. I'll make it pretty quick, just 2 points. Well, actually, first off, congrats on the 200 episodes. I was on 200, didn't get up to speak, but
Oh, I appreciate
201,
that.
love it. Always been a big fan, so love the account and everything you do. I know it's got to be time consuming. I joined right at the beginning. You were talking about savings, so I don't know if you said this part, but I think one of the best parts of SEC Media Days was when Kirby got up and said, "Hey, I want it duly noted. I got in here without a credential. I just walked right in." So that was great. And then seeing Saban on the set, looking at him when he had to say that, and Saban listening and seeing his face, the cameras caught that. The other thing I wanted to ask, I don't know if everybody, I know this is a whole country, so I don't want to focus too much on SEC. But Eli Drinkwitz went today, coach of Missouri, and he
Yeah,
gave kind of
quote.
a little monologue, big quote about Mike Leach, and I thought it was great. And he said it. I think we a lot feel this way. I feel this way. I bet some of the people in the community do. But I want to get your take. Where do you feel on should Mike Leach be in the College Football Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I think the minimum or the way they restrict it doesn't make sense because there are people in the Hall of Fame who actually wouldn't be in with the rules that they've created. Now, I agree. Yeah, I think it should be a little more nuanced than having like a minimum GPA or something. It's not a GPA, but you know what I mean? Like there should be a little more nuance to it than that. I mean, like Howard Schnellenberger is another great example of a guy who doesn't qualify because even
not
though
in
he
it.
built Miami, took Miami from a program that might close to just the dynasty that those of us who were around in the 80s and 90s remember. There's a number of great examples, and Mike Leach is probably one of the most recent ones. And I think a prime example. And then you have that whole fiasco with Les Miles suing to try and get at least one more win back so that he can qualify.
Should never have gone to
Because he
Kansas.
also is one game below the minimum from what I recall when somebody did the math on that. But yeah, I agree. It's a shame, and there's a number of coaches who are not allowed to be in the Hall of Fame for reasons that seem arbitrary, and really uncontroversial. That's the problem. This isn't like the argument with historically over Pete Rose and the MLB, pardon me, the Baseball Hall of Fame. This is like a technicality, and it feels a little dumb, especially when you know where they were coaching, what they were building up, and their influence on the game. I think those are great reasons to consider that. Frankly, I'd love to see them broaden the College Football Hall of Fame. There's people who've contributed to the sport that are again, I'm not saying like make it hundreds and hundreds of people, but there's a handful of people or even coaches in other places that might even qualify too. I'd love to see them say like this. Mexico's had college football since the 1920s. Has there been like one coach there where if you talk to all the people, they're like, oh yeah, no, that guy was it, or or Japan, or some of these other countries like Canada, where they play college football all the time. Really make it. I'm not saying have a huge section of it, but just like a couple of like poster or something. I think that would be neat. But yeah, I thought you were going to talk about. He also Eli Drinkwitz had a great quote talking about offensive lineman Caden Green. Caden Green has STIs, size, toughness, and instincts. And I'm like, that'll get everyone's attention.
Yeah,
I
love Grim. Every time he gets the microphone, he's just, I mean, come on, his costumes he's done on the podium, going back and forth with Darth. I mean, he's so fun. Him and Mullen going back at each other. I mean, just gosh, he's one of the guys I really respect. Gosh, but hey, I appreciate your thoughts. Thanks for letting me up.
Yeah, absolutely. I see John and Ski Mask have hands up, and then we'll listen to Ron.
Hey, going back to college football, the game. Do you see the fact that the game had kind of forced UCF to recognize a civil conflict?
I heard that. Is that what I just heard? The civil conflict was coming in the news. Is the trophy in the game?
Yes, it is in the game, and it forced UCF to be like, no, that's our trophy. On Twitter, everyone's like, oh my god, this is the first time they've ever talked about it officially. Like, at least to my knowledge, I was like, I don't think they've ever officially like really recognized the trophy or anything with it, and I can't believe it took a video game to force their hand to recognize a whole debacle they didn't want to be involved with in the first place.
I just remember that at one point it disappeared and reappeared, and it seemed to be slightly different. People were like being really astute and paying attention to whatever nuances were different in like the font on the trophy or something like that. But that is Bob Diaco's the gift to college football as a UConn head coach. I love that because I mean UConn's still in that weird boat where they're going to be. It's for those who haven't been paying attention because Army's now in the American, and then next season UMass, not this season, but next season UMass is going to be in the MAC. So that leaves like UConn and Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's quasi ACC for football. It's going to basically leave UConn as the remaining independent football team. So I love that. Like they should start declaring rivalries with other teams. Like, a unilateral rivalry game like that is, I just love that. And to bring a trophy, like you don't even like skip the formalities. Like here, I local trophy shop made this. This is us. This is our rivalry. I love it. Ski Mask, your hands up too.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember? I think the first time UConn tried to force a civil conflict, UCF won it, and they just left the trophy on the bench.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Great moment. But I was going to get to CEO's point about Mike Leach and some other Hall of Fame coaches. One point, I mean, back to the video game. we don't want to make this whole thing about video game, but every air raid concept play in the game, it is named using the same logic that Mike Leach used for his plays. So if you open like the generic air raid playbook, the play calls are how Mike Leach would code the plays, which is a great nod to him. And he
I heard
should
that.
be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I believe was it Stoops who said that he'd vacate all his games against Mike Leach to put him over 70%?
That would be awesome if he. Unfortunately, he obviously doesn't have that call. But can you imagine, like, hey, I used illegal players this season, so we just like watch. Oh my goodness!
Yeah, but I was gonna say, you know, there's so many coaches who affected the game. I think it's weird to talk about because it's like I think he's the only person that has this record, but we all know Mac Brown, you know, Texas, UNC.
Mm-hmm.
He has an older brother named Watson Brown. And Watson's whole thing was going to a university, but then working with the other universities in the area to make their college football team stable and make the program, you know, like not lose so much money that they'd have to abandon it. And that was sort of his thing, and he worked at a bunch of small schools. But he also has, I think he's the only head coach with like over 200 losses for his career. So he should be in the Hall of Fame just on that, because I don't think any head coach could figure out how to hang around long enough in Division I football to rack up 200 losses.
He's the turnaround guy, so yeah, he gets stuck with that. Oh my goodness. Oh, you know, and I see Ron. I'm gonna get to one more story just before I forget. This is just one of those one-off stories because it was hilarious. I don't know if you all saw this. It came up, I think, right around Mountain West Media Days, but to keep geese off San Jose State's practice field. So they've been having problems with Greek geese. They poop everywhere. They're a nightmare. If I see them on my deck, I get Canadian geese. You know, I live in Minnesota. If I see them on my deck, I am like a madman running out there. They can have the rest of the yard. The turkeys, not a problem, but geese is, yeah, you want to get them away from anywhere where you want to walk. Anyway, so the school has purchased 4 fake plastic coyotes, and they place them on the field each night. And apparently they move the geese around every night so that they're not always in the same place. And this has apparently kept the geese from hanging out on the San Jose State practice field. I love it. And it made me think there's this, I can't remember when I even saw this, a couple of years ago, but in Japan, they were having problems with bears coming out of the woods to eat like stuff from the farm. And they were like, how do we scare them? And they had created this over-engineered, hilariously demonic wolf that would appear and light up, and its eyes would turn red, and it would make all this sound. And part of me was like, this is almost designed to scare humans. The bear's just like, why is there this big loud noise there? I want to now see San Jose State bring out one of those, and you know, maybe they'll tap into Silicon Valley, give it a little bit of, you know, some of that machine learning, AI. And then, you know, that will be the beginning of Skynet. It will actually start as these geese scaring coyotes that decided that the true way to stop football fields from getting ruined is to just stop the humans from using the football field. Anyway, it's late. Ron, what's on your mind, man? Thank you for being patient.
Yo, what's up, guys?
Hey.
So I haven't played the CFB game yet. I haven't had a chance. I got a whole bunch of things going on. But I heard that you can have burner accounts on Twitter in the game. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Road to Glory, because I haven't played it, I've seen things, but I have a friend. I have to see if I can download this video and I will put it in the comments. It's hilarious. He basically, a girl's asking you out on a date, and you have a response like, play it cool, turn it down, or be very eager. He picked very eager, and the girl blocked him. It's they put too much into it. And
I'm sorry. That's like scarily realistic on there. You know, you're too eager. They're like, ooh, never mind.
But yeah, you can make burn accounts to defend yourself if you have a bad game.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
They just think of everything. That is fantastic. I can't even.
Also, We were talking about the College Football Hall of Fame. If we want to get coaches in there who have who like don't meet the goal, like do not meet the requirements at all, I say we let Bob Green from Montana Tech in there. He was my favorite meme coach of all time. That dude was hilarious. He needs to be in the Hall of Fame. I think my favorite quote of his is, "We played like the kid playing second French horn in the high school band. Not good." Or they attacked the football like a hobo on a ham sandwich. He was just filled with them.
Yeah, we should have that, an anti-Hall of Fame, and just, have it next door and, maybe share the space of a Waffle House or something to really kind of to capture that, all of that. John, I see your hand up.
Hey, actually, I did want to talk about something we talked about a little bit earlier in the conversation.
Sure.
We were talking about potential media deals, evaporating, or ESPN not being the biggest, being the only bidder. What do we feel is the possibility of other media entities like Apple or Hulu or other streaming services jumping into the fray? See, maybe this potential, hey, ESPN and Fox might be maxed out, but we have a lot more reserves than those guys have. Can we potentially jump in and go after college football? Do we think that's a likely possibility? Maybe not next year or the year after, but in a potential long-term future.
I think the long term may go in that direction, only because, for example, that was what the Pac-12 media deal was based around. It was based around potentially using Apple, I believe, and the trends that were kind of developing out as people were watching the struggle of George Kliakov last year to kind of assemble a deal was that the future seems to eventually be kind of the streaming services, but right now they can't quite. Well, they could, but they don't have the interest quite yet in putting together a deal that could compete with the terrestrial networks that are way more willing to spend because that is their existence. They need to have things broadcasting. It's not on demand, and that may eventually though eclipse or perhaps the terrestrial networks recede enough for that to be a window. But certainly when you're looking at kind of the macro level of where college broadcast rights are going, certainly that is potentially one of them. And as long as the eyeballs keep going, there will be someone who'll be willing to pay for it. It's just interesting to see though whether or not some of the old venues or probably the old payers have been kind of maxed out a little bit because of the crunch of again, as I mentioned, the crunch of cord cutting that's been going on now for a while, and the fact that again, we're seeing it hitting all levels of sports, so not just that. So, and even then, if they have a limited budget, who are they spending on? Because then again, the NFL is still out there; it's still a bigger entity. NBA is more desirable. There's a lot of pro sports or international sports that are growing in cachet within the United States. It's an interesting question, but yeah, I think streaming is certainly going to be part of that. Ron.
I think that's like what you're talking about with college football going to streaming services. I think the issue is there's just like an insurmountable amount of garbage that no one wants to watch happening in college football. Like that's the whole sickos thing. Like realistically, sure, like the Pac-12 could get the deal, but like I just don't see why they would pay that much money for, like a Washington State versus Fresno State game that they have to televise at 11 p.m. Eastern, where they could put that money towards basketball and then get like Lakers versus even Pistons who are garbage. It doesn't matter. That's just a pro. That's a pro league that could probably pulling just as much money is probably going to cost them just as much. I just don't see how college football really is just quite there yet for them. I don't think you get enough games, and it doesn't get enough eyeballs. The thing with the NFL is you don't get many games, but that's literally guaranteed millions and millions of viewers, where college football just does not get that.
Yeah. No, you're. Oh, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, hold on. I know you call it trash, but me watching Akron and Kent State play on a Wednesday night is art to me. Thank you, sir.
I absolutely love it. Like, listen, we're talking about college football in July to a guy on Twitter.
I mean, I was about to say this is the audience that is actually okay with it, but I think we have to acknowledge
like we are the absolute
exist.
minority here. Like, do you like when my dad watches college football? Do you think he wants to watch Michigan versus Ohio State on ESPN or Akron versus Arizona State on FS2?
Yeah.
Like what game is catching his eye?
Why not both?
Yeah. Oh, speaking of, it's so funny. I just want to acknowledge a quick comment that someone had left. Mage Ingrid couldn't make it tonight, but They wanted to mention that their dad said his favorite college football rivalry was Syracuse and Penn State when they were independents. That must have been a long time ago, because Penn State did not join the Big Ten and made it the awkward 11 in what, 93, somewhere in the early 90s. And Syracuse has been the ACC as long as I paid attention, but that's cool. And their mom's favorite rivalry was Texas versus Georgia. Boy, that one, I don't remember that as a rivalry, although I could see those two having played, because they've always been in separate conferences. Maybe they had a couple of series that really were in kind of a pivotal moment for Major Ingrid's mom. But that's interesting. I just want to acknowledge those two games in that comment, because it's sort of tied into what we were just talking about. Speaking of Georgia, only because this is kind of cute. So the stories, the announcements came out separately that UCLA was dropping a series with Georgia and dropping Auburn from their future schedule, but then they revealed the reason they were dropping them is to actually put Utah and Cal back on their schedule. So they're trying to, I guess, maybe have a few of those former Pac-12 teams. Although I love this, because when you hear UCLA is dropping a potentially interesting Big Ten SEC matchup for Cal, all you can think of is calamony, because and again, Sam Let UCLA fan wrote, the Calamony Bowl is alive. The trophy should be a giant cardboard check, which I think is a fantastic idea. I think that needs to be the rivalry trophy between any future Cal UCLA games. If you see again, a Cal fan, get Coinwood. If UCLA wins, the check has to say negative $10 million. Again, I love it. That's a kind of stupid college football silliness I appreciate, and I'd love to see that actually happen. Ski Master Murphy, I see your hand up, and then we'll let College Football Lounge have their say.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Mage Ingrid's comment that I do know Syracuse and Penn State played each other every year through the 70s and 80s. So she was aging us a little bit, but I had to look up the Georgia versus Texas games, and she called us extremely old because they've only played each other 5 times, and the only time they played each other back to back was in '57 and '58. So
Wow.
I don't know how old her parents are, but she's going way back with that one. But I do believe, but they did play in '84. I believe they played back before we had a formalized championship game. They played each other in the postseason in a bowl game. Texas was ranked number 2 and Georgia was number 7. That may be what her mom's talking about. But yeah, we're. I don't think we're as old as she thinks we are.
College Football Lounge, you've been really patient. How are you?
Hey, everybody. Good evening. I just wanted to comment on there's some talk about broadcast rights potentially moving to streaming partners. And this is kind of crazy to say, but I think one of the things that's going to be watched pretty closely is WWE Raw moving to Netflix in January, because Netflix is paying what seems like an enormous amount of money for the rights to broadcast Raw, which is a once a week program that typically does not even draw 2 million viewers. It's currently on USA, but that deal's like $5 billion over 10 years. I think Netflix has an opt out at 5 years. But I think that's going to be watched pretty closely to see how successful that partnership is, because to me, it seems like the first, I don't know if you want to call that sports or sports adjacent properties of that magnitude to move entirely to streaming. And if it is a success and it's a moneymaker for Netflix, that may be something that is looked at pretty closely as some of these broadcast deals start coming up in the future.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. And another thing that I know Brett Yormark, who's always just throwing up wild ideas. I mean this in a good way. I mean, because again, my colleague, my co-host on a podcast, CBS Sports, John J. Rogers, said, when you hear Brett Yormark talk, it's like listening to a Silicon Valley CEO pitching ideas. But I know one thing they're trying to go after. I believe it's I think or am I blurring the Mountain West, or is it the Big 12? But they were talking about a FAST channel, which free ad-supported television, or it's like kind of a streaming channel to support some of the conferences are trying to come up with. Maybe can we create our own sort of fast and lean broadcast option? Again, I don't know if that's going to go anywhere, but it's certainly some of these conferences have always been talking about that. I remember, goodness, this is when, oh gosh, this must have been Mountain West Media Day around 2018, 2017, where that was the first time I heard someone using the acronyms changed, but at the time it was FANG, which stood for like FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, to talk about like where they could potentially broadcast Mountain West games. And I remember for a brief moment, some of you may remember, there were a couple of Mountain West games that were broadcast when it was still called Twitter. And like they weren't like major games, but it was like a real interesting novelty. So the experiments have been out there, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see perhaps where it goes. Ron, your hands up.
And I just wanted to talk about the WWE thing again, and why I think that's not the best comparison. Is again, like I was talking about, like when I said an insurmountable amount of garbage. Like, how many viewers are those bad games going to pull in? And they need to be able to support that. Whereas WWE, even if it doesn't have like big numbers compared to like the big games, which Netflix wouldn't, for example, wouldn't even get because they're already locked into TV deals, they're still guaranteed one event a week, at least 800,000 viewers. So I feel like that's kind of an unfair comparison to make, because on one side it's one event compared to many events where they're probably not even going to get close to 800,000 viewers. So that's when it gets like sort of tricky and interesting. Mm. But hearing the acronym FANG is hilarious, because now in tech it's been expanded to Mango, Meta, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Oracle. So we're just adding more tech companies to it in the lingo.
Love it.
People have moved on to just calling it Big N now. But yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. Like WWE, it's just one event, and they're guaranteed viewers every week. Whereas, college football, it's a lot more than one event, and you're not guaranteed any viewers for those really scrappy.
Yeah, that would be
games,
interesting though. Imagine then if one of the streamers kind of buys into the media rights, where they get basically the rights to a couple of top games a week for each conference.
That's like what it would have to be.
And I mean, because then it becomes appointment viewing, and therefore they get those subscribers. Because I think that's what they're going to. That's going to people will always, who are fans, will always tune to where they can see those games. And that would be an interesting one.
And that's why it works for Amazon with football, because they're like, we'll just get Thursday night.
Yeah, exactly.
That was just
exactly.
Their we'll just get Thursday, and that's what Netflix is doing with NBA now. I think they took the Christmas games for NBA, so that's how it's gonna have to start. There's no universe where a reconstructed Pac-12 gets a reasonable deal from like a Prime Video. That's just that's not in the cards. But maybe some top flight games get on there.
Yeah, Ski Mask, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was also going to say on this whole WWE to Netflix thing, even though Raw and SmackDown are averaging around 2 to 2.5 million viewers a week, it's 52 weeks out of the year, so that sports has a dead period, and then also apparently Netflix has put demands on the WWE superstars and how many of them have to make regular appearances. So they're not trying to have any down shows on Netflix. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out. And I think I always think of like going back to when I was younger, and like how Napster sort of set like a very weird precedent of like letting all these big media companies know, like, you're going to have to figure out a way to get your content to the consumer for almost as cheap of an entry fee as possible, because we'll figure it out. And I think a lot of these broadcasters have figured out how to keep it cheap, but also how to make a lot of money. And now we're seeing Netflix having an advertisement subscription model added in instead of it all being no ads. I think we're going to see a lot of these streaming services like add a lot more ads, and who knows if the advertisers are going to pay for these slots if they're more than terrestrial TV. But I think it's going to be the way to go, and I think this WWE thing will probably be interesting to watch and see, and it'll probably, I wouldn't say perfectly dictate college football, but I think it'll be a good in between, because NFL and NBA and then college football is such a large drop off, but it's not as low as other things.
Yeah.
So
you
it'll
maybe
be
just think because college football is built around ads, it feels like. And would it end up being less ads on a streaming service, but still ads? Therefore, the streaming service will get their ads in. So everyone's win-win. The fans are like, hey, there's fewer ads if you watch this game on Netflix or Amazon or wherever. It's not like they're going SEC on CBS on us with the number of ad breaks. But that's a great point. It'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of nuance to this one. Since we're on kind of more complicated topics, I figured I'd also mention, and again, apparently, and this is something that came out from ESPN, the government has said that Title IX should apply to revenue sharing, and this would be related to the House settlement. So, which I'm going to get to in a second because there's an unsurprising hiccup there. So essentially, the House settlement, if it goes through, and it would take a couple of years to sort this thing out, we're not even close to knowing what it's going to entirely look like. Not only would the group of previous athletes be compensated, but moving forward, there would be a sort of amount of money that could be distributed to each athletic department's players across all sports. And that's the thing. They were wondering, would Title IX apply? And this is, I believe, one of the first formal signals that yes, Title IX will apply. So you'll have to figure out a way to divvy that up evenly. Honestly, with NIL, that's still probably going to be the more a much larger amount of money than what's going to come out of the revenue sharing when it's all split up, which is still going to be a decent amount of money. I'm not saying that again, athletes will get something out of it. But going back to the House settlement, and I cautioned this, I think, over the months that have been passed since it was first announced that they'd come to an initial agreement. The agreement that people keep talking about is still very tentative. They haven't even written it out yet. They basically came on like a skeleton outline, and they got all the conferences to agree to it. They got some of those, although some of the schools in the non-FBS football conferences in D1 are not thrilled with it. Some of them may sue over it. The problem is there's no standing the sue right now. No one can, because all they did was agree to, okay, let's pause the lawsuit for a moment and let's write this grand book. It's going to be like a book of rules on how we're going to pay the previous players, but really move forward and create a structure to compensate athletes. They are now saying that it's running late. It will not be submitted. It was supposed to be submitted this week for court approval. And that was the thing. The judge could look at it and say, like, we don't agree to this settlement. This is unfair. If they read, obviously, some of the complaints from people that might be affected by it. We're not going to reach that point yet. And again, I was looking at Michael McCann's comment on it. Professor McCann, I always love his writing. I've interviewed him several times. He summarized it. The proposed settlement, if approved by court and if it withstands objections and appeals, would resolve the antitrust cases and reshape college sports, but it won't be filed in court today. And my favorite part, the lawyers are finding it harder to write than they anticipated, with an eye roll. Yeah, no, anyone who heard what they were trying to come up with, there's no way that was going to be done by this summer. So yeah, this will probably, maybe if we're lucky, be filed in the courts sometime during this upcoming season. And again, it'll probably be challenged. And I'm not saying it's going to be challenged by the people we expect. It might get challenged by, again, a school that is in D1, doesn't have football, is barely eking by, and is worried that suddenly this is going to bankrupt them. Like, they may say, like, we didn't get a chance to really argue this. We didn't get a chance to have our view on this. Our conference was basically forced into it. You can see some of those arguments coming up. So even though everyone wants this to be like, all right, we're going to have revenue sharing, I'm like, slow down. It's going to be a while before this ever settles down. I don't want to get into too much of the weeds in it. Gosh knows I love to do that. But I just thought I'd go ahead and mention that, because those two are still, those are stories that are still happening in the background. And I think some of the fans, especially who haven't been as hardcore as all of you, who again are paying attention to what's going on in the off season, let alone on a X space, they're going to be coming out of their, I used to be that type of person, come out of your off-season slumber to find out, like, what, we're paying the players now? It's like, not, well, we're eventually we're doing it with NIL, but eventually we're going to do revenue sharing. Ski Mask, I see your hand up.
Speaking on more legal matters, since you're a lawyer, you're probably well versed in this. Copyright infringement. So someone decided, I don't know who started the trend, but Sickos Committee has been covering it, and people have been putting together a map of every single high school,
Oh,
well, whether that's football or not, all of their logos. It is the most hilarious expose in copyright infringement.
well, and
Almost
oh
none of
gosh,
them,
yeah.
and it's all over the place. There's one school. It was in Indiana. I did not know the name of the school. You see the logo. It is literally nothing but the Alabama A, colored purple, overlaid on the continent of Africa. It's just, it's, I don't know if the Alabama A is supposed to stand for Africa or if there's something else going on, but whoever started this, and they're like, at first it started out, people were just doing separate states. You know, now there's people trying to combine all these states into one photo. It's hilarious.
Yeah, so that has always been one of those funny things, and it's typically trademark intellect because we're talking about intellectual property. Um, not to bore everybody, there's basically three main chunks that we talk about. There's copyright, which is a very specific expression of something. Like usually, it's done for photographs or stories, a specific story. Like not the concept of man meets girl, man loses girl, man gets girl in the end. That's you can't copyright that, but you can copyright a specific story or a cartoon like Steamboat Mickey finally went into the public domain. Um, and then you have patents, which are like inventions, obviously a totally different thing. Trademarks are logos and slogans and things that can theoretically last forever because you can use it forever. And we want to allow you to enjoy the goodwill that you've created behind that brand. My gosh, I'm trying not to talk like a lawyer, but I am. But so all of that. The classic example was, well, Jumbo High School, where in my hometown, uses like the Wisconsin logo, or hell, they even use the themes, the theme song, the fight song, just read the lyrics. Like that has gone on and gone on and gone on. Now, sometimes historically, including I should say NFL teams run into this too, of course. Historically, the polite thing would be sometimes the NFL team would like, all right, we're going to give you a license, $1 a year. Just make sure we get the dollar. It's yours. That way, because there's an interesting if you the trademark law, the complication of it, copyrights expire eventually, patents expire eventually. As I said, trademarks can last forever. So we put more we as in the legal institutions put more requirements on a trademark owner. If you want to keep that logo, not only do you have to maintain it, you have to fight for it. That's why I always sympathize with Texas A&M whenever this happens because the 12th man is their trademark. The idea of the 12th man. They went through and trademarked it. If you want to keep that, anytime somebody started to call themselves a 12th man, no matter where they were, the law obligates Texas A&M to do a cease and desist or license it, but I don't think they want to license it to basically fight that. So logos, oftentimes, like an NFL team would just try to be nice to the local high school team. They'd like, hey, here's $1, here's this. But yeah, some of this stuff gets elaborate. And then some schools, especially high schools, they just don't know this stuff. They don't hire an attorney, let alone an intellectual property attorney. I know this stuff because intellectual property was like one of my favorite areas in law school. That just happened to be like one of my favorite areas. So, especially trademarks and copyrights. But going to going back to the trademark thing. Yeah, so that's typically how they'd be handled. They would say, here's a license for it. But every now and again, you get a high school that did that, and then the school would find out, like, nope. And then the school would suddenly change. You see it happen in all kinds of areas. Like, I always love when a popular local shop because I live in the Twin Cities, so major, not an enormous city, but a decent sized city. There's a coffee shop, I remember, and then they abruptly changed their name after 5 years, and apparently the coffee shop with the same name that was older found out about them and wrote them a cease and desist because you're not our coffee shop. Or there was a pinball place in my town called Tilt. How no one thought to just throw it in the. You don't even need an attorney. Throw it into Google. See if there's another Tilt pinball bar in the United States that might notice you. And again, so they just switched the letters around and now they're Litt, Litt pinball. So they even were able to keep most of the logos. I literally just took the sign and rearranged the letters. So a lot of this stuff happens because of that. Some of it is licensed, some of it isn't, and sometimes schools are obligated, or I should say, copyright hold. Oh, gosh, I just did it myself. Trademark holders are obligated to act on it. One of my favorite ones was, I believe, just people were talking about the Green Bay, Georgia, the fact that they both use a similar logo just with different colors. I forgot who was the original there. Sometimes it would be the college team, and sometimes it was a pro team. Like the University of Chicago and the Chicago Bears actually both have a similar stylized C logo historically, and I believe it belonged to the Bears first, or did it belong to the University of Chicago? Again, it's fascinating stuff. So sometimes these things are out there, but yeah, I haven't dove into it. I think I've seen it in passing on my Twitter feed, exactly what you're talking about, but it's been a fascinating thing to understand. And it is, yeah, it is a mess. And no one's actually sat down and tried to undo it. And maybe, wouldn't it be hilarious if this project by Sickos Committee ends up basically creating a roadmap for trademark enforcers? Like that would be, as a lawyer, that's hilarious. For everyone else, not so funny. But I'm on Team Evil, right? So like, I'm like, I kind of want to see it happen now.
Shots,
But
shout out billable hours.
yeah, exactly. Billable hours forever, man. That's awesome. John, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say I mean that whole idea of logos very conveniently looking like an NFL team or a college. I think it's been around since forever. I think my high
Oh yeah.
school has an identical. Not even like they didn't switch the colors or anything. We have an identical logo to the New England Patriots. Like it's not even like it was no effort was put, and it's like on the walls. It's on it's everything. The merch stuff we sell, like yeah. But I think for the most part, I think one, I imagine it's a complete PR disaster to start suing high schools on like with minimum budgets and minimum funding, so you can have them get rid of something like it. No joy. I don't think you really get any fans or anyone cheering in the rafters when you're like beating down on like 200 student high schools for the logo. But I think if I'm correct, I think a lot of high schools there's some agreements have been done in the past where they pay for the trademark, but they send $1 to the
Yeah,
team.
exactly. Yeah,
And
no, that's
very,
usually that's
it's,
not unusual if they're more amiable intellectual property holder. So
yeah, I think that's so. I know like there's always the ideas like can you sue? I think for the most part there's agreements, gentlemen's agreements. I think done between a lot of these
well,
programs.
no, they actually have to do a formal one like that only because, again, so that you don't, if you allow your trademark to be used without your permission, you can lose the rights to it. That's why they have to do that. That's why they have to come up with a dollar agreement, because there needs to be like, no, we licensed it. It isn't that we're allowing people to use this. Therefore, why should you be given the legal protection for it? That's where the kind of tight place that a lot of these logo owners kind of get stuck in when they're faced with that situation, because they have to do something, otherwise they could just lose all rights to it. It isn't quite abandonment. Again, that's the only area of intellectual property where you can abandon something. If you abandon a logo, it's so funny. It's like, I'll give you a great example. My kids are in camps right now, summer camps, day camps, whatever. I don't care. They don't really teach them anything. It's just an excuse to get them out of the house. So they got digital photography, right? I thought they were going to supply them cameras. They ended up supplying them cameras, but the email I got sent was wrong. I'm solo dadding it this week, right? So like I am like, okay, cool. I got to make you lunches. Oh, and I got to find digital cameras. I'm not buying you a $400 SLR. I'm not, that's a cheap camera nowadays. But I mean, like, so the cheapest cameras I could find that were available on Sunday night, because again, like anyways. So we're these Konica cameras. Now, I'm old. No, Minolta. I'm old enough to remember when the Mind of Minolta, like it was a major brand. Then I found out they actually lost the rights. They abandoned the trademark for their cameras. So now somebody picked it up, and they're being slapped on like these bargain basement crappy cameras that are not being made by the Mind of Minolta, in Japan and all of that stuff. So that's a good example of it. So that's why they kind of feel they have to be obligated to kind of do these things. We're getting really into this. I didn't want to get too deep into intellectual property. College Football Lounge, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in real quick. I've seen these logo maps circulating on Twitter, and my mind immediately went to, okay, what if we flip? Because obviously, yes, you look at these, and there's so many logos that you immediately recognize as belonging to either colleges, professional teams, whatever. And my mind immediately went to, what if we flip this on its head and send in the wackiest original, like high schools that have original mascots, logos that nobody's ever heard of. Maybe they're, related to things local to them, stuff that's truly original that nobody would ever imagine somebody was using. I think that would be fun to see those, what people have come up with over the years.
Oh yeah, that would be great. I know there's been some great team names out there. I know there's a high school somewhere. It's years and years since I read this article. They were called like the Nimrods or something like that. Yeah, and all I was thinking of for half of these teams, it's like for goodness sake, pay a local graphic designer. It's not like these guys are making these men and women are making a ton of money in what they do. Maybe find someone, a graduate of your school who went to do graphic design, and maybe do one of these logos for yourselves. Be a little creative. It's all right. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to do a quick just roundup of some of the other just items that kind of I think caught my eye from this past week. Because again, these are mostly now kind of diving into some of the media days, which again I just had this whole. We just dropped an episode of the College Football Survivor Show with me and Shahan J. Raja, and we're talking about having. He's actually covering quite a few media days. I'm going to be at Big Ten media days myself next week, and if you've covered one media day, and I've covered quite a few, you don't expect a whole lot of information, as I said at the outset, out of them. But some of the more interesting kind of quotes. Dave Aranda of Baylor said, he was asked what prompted the recent run of recruiting success, and he succinctly said, we're paying players. I mean, that's why Baylor's suddenly getting good at recruiting again. Also from Big 12, Shador Sanders said that where everybody's Super Bowl. That I get why he said it, and I mean, part of it's the Sanders family is just fantastic at generating headlines. I mean, honestly, it is so boring to go to a media day event and talk to most of the players because you're not, you don't give them a scholarship because they're a great, interview. You give them because they play football really well, right? Some of them are quiet, some of them are introverts. Usually they try to pick somebody who is either a leader or an outgoing guy or something like that, or a star. I've seen every version of that. But the Sanders guys, man, they bring out some headlines. And to be honest, I think the Super Bowl comment is pretty going to be true because, I mean, North Dakota State's going to treat them like the Super Bowl in that opening game. Nebraska is looking for revenge to their blood rivals that they had from back when they were in the same conference. Colorado State is certainly going to be, I mean, Fort Collins is going to be crazy when they go back there for the first time since '96. So I think for a lot of teams that isn't inaccurate. It's not that they are playing. Obviously, they're not Georgia, but I think a lot of eyes are going to be on that. And I was told again from the boots on the ground in Vegas that Colorado was the show, and Utah. But Utah is kind of, if you know the area, Utahns love Vegas. They love going to Vegas. And it wasn't surprising that those were the two. It was like historically when I used to do Mountain West Media Days, even though UNLV up until recently has been pretty bad, that would always be the biggest crowd because they're the hometown team. So Utah's kind of filling that spot at the Vegas location for the Big 12, but at the same time, it's Colorado. It's fascinating because you can imagine how crazy it's going to be at Big 12, probably at SEC Media, because SEC Media Days have been busy, but it's been a little different vibe because when it was in Hoover for all those years, just outside of Birmingham, Alabama, a huge crowds would show up to just kind of get pictures of the coaches and the players as they're going in and out and all of that stuff. It hasn't quite been that same vibe, although I'm very curious to see what the Texas crowd is going to be like for that. Certainly the media will mob them. That I have no doubt, as well as, of course, even Oklahoma. It's obviously the Metroplex. They have a huge audience out there too, as well, of course, as A&M being nearby rather than having to make all the local media schlep out to Alabama. Ski Master Murphy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had two related sort of roundup stories. The first one was that apparently for bowl season, the teams that just left the Pac-12 can still be putting bowl games linked to the Pac-12, so they can be superseded over the Big Ten games. Thought that was an interesting fact. And more towards your Baylor comment, I had this written down, but I didn't talk about it yet. Apparently, teams are all about spending money now. Apparently, Phil Knight, co-founder of
Yes.
Nike, he said he's willing to pay anything in NIL to get Oregon to a championship. I think this is. I don't think I've seen another team with someone as big of a person basically say, "Yeah, he's gonna open the checkbook and probably write some blank
Yeah.
checks to where
Well,
they need to be."
let's be real for a second. Phil Knight is on a whole other planet. And I mean that because he's worth now 30 something $billion. $30 billion. Now, most guys, men and women who are worth that much money, they don't care about college. They just buy an NFL franchise or buy an NBA
Yeah,
franchise or, do something like that. He cares about college sports, and we don't have many of those. Like T Boone Pickens was frankly a little finicky with Oklahoma State sometimes, but he was close to that zone. But Phil Knight is in a whole other stratosphere. It would be like suddenly, again, if suddenly Jeff Bezos decided he really wants Washington football to be unstoppable, I mean, that would barely put a dent in his money because he's still so rich that, I mean, he could spend, because that's the thing, like most of the supporters of college football that are at that crazy booster level are millionaires, maybe some teeter into the low billionaire, but being in the 30 billion zone, you're in a whole other planet. So yeah, he could absolutely do that. I mean, he's in his 80s now, so spending at an insane level year after year after year, he'll probably not even come close to making a dent before I can't remember where it was, but I was listening to an interview. I think it was Ross Dellinger who said before he moves on. Like as though it was a
yeah.
job or something.
He said he wanted to spend, he's willing to spend anything to see a title before he dies.
Yeah.
And as the old owner of the New York Yankees used to say, George Steinbrenner, you don't build championship teams, you buy them. And Phil Knight's gonna. It's the first time, like you said, first time someone of this magnitude of finance. Normally they go by a pro franchise. He said, "No, I'm gonna do this with Oregon." I hope he does it. I really do, because I always made the
Yeah.
joke. I always made the joke like every other school is lucky that the Ivy League wants to have this weird academic standard, because if they wanted to use their endowments to win college football, it wouldn't be a competition.
Yeah, it would be absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, I really I think they have everything in place. One of the more interesting thoughts I read about that quote that's going around that Phil Knight had said this is that it's true or not, the effect is already there. I think the word got out, and people will be realizing, or at least players will hear that, and decision makers who advise players will hear that and be willing to seriously listen to an Oregon offer. And Dan Lanning, I mean, all credit to him. He's created. That's the whole thing, I mean, of the new additions to the Big Ten, Oregon by far seems to be the most terrifying at this moment because USC is just who knows what's going on there, and UCLA, they're just happy to be along. And Washington would have been great if they literally didn't just get gutted completely. And who knows what Washington is going to be this season. Although they're going to be featured in Penn State's whiteout game. That was also announced in the last week. So that'll be an interesting one. College Football Lounge, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in real quick, backing up a little bit. You had mentioned Colorado having North Dakota State week one. I think that's a Thursday night game. And so another Big 12 game, week one. Oklahoma State has South Dakota State.
Yes.
And man, those two games are fascinating. I think it's very likely that both of them go off as sub 10-point line, under 10-point lines. And those are going to be really competitive games. And I'm just, as a fan, I'm really grateful that those are scheduled and they're going to happen because I think they're going to be really interesting. And I think it's going to be, I mean, that's going to be a real, particularly for Colorado, that's going to be a pretty good indicator of where they're actually at this point. Because, I mean, both those games, I look for them to be really competitive.
The only thing I'm going to caution with the North Dakota State game is that they're definitely not as at their peak right now, because also their head coach Matt Entz is now the linebacker coach at USC. And part of that kind of coaching shift, I think he was kind of burning out a little bit there and realized, frankly, actually, I don't blame him, because let's put that in context. His one of his coordinators goes to be the coordinator at Northwestern. And then suddenly, we all remember what happened, last offseason. Suddenly, he's pushed to be Dave Braun is suddenly pushed to being the interim head coach, and then gets the permanent position. So Matt Entz has literally just watched his coordinator become the head coach of a Big Ten school and get paid like 10 times. It's something ridiculous compared to their salary base. So he was like, "All right, I'm out. I'll take that linebacking job at USC." That defense actually looks attractive to me. But South Dakota State's definitely, I mean, they've back-to-back national champions. I forgot what win streak they're on. I think the last time they lost was the opener 2 seasons ago, which was a really close game with Iowa, and everyone was like, "Wow, is Iowa really bad?" And it turns out South Dakota State was just really good. So I'm looking forward to that Oklahoma State game, because Oklahoma State's pretty dang good. I think obviously Utah, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State are the 3 teams that are most popularly being put. And I think Arizona even got a first place vote, but those 3 are the teams that people are really looking to this season in the Big 12. But crazier things have happened. Michigan's the poster child for that when App State walked in. And they were a good team. That was the thing. They were a good FCS team that walked in. So you never know what can happen there. Ski Mask, I see your hand up.
I mean, this is a sidebar, but speaking of FCS teams, bringing it back to college football 25. Apparently, I haven't experienced it because I haven't played the teams, but apparently the FCS teams in the game are they are putting everyone in a hurt locker currently. Like they are beating the mess out of everyone, and in the simulation, like they're beating the top ranked teams. So it's just a funny story. The FCS
Aren't they
teams are
generic
killing
teams?
everyone. Yes, they're generic teams, but they're based off of some popular YouTubers teams. Like one is literally they told me they was putting him in the game, but it's literally his whole logo. If you guys know, not the expert, his team, the UGF Pandas. But yeah, because I know circulating earlier within the subreddit was one guy saying, yeah, this FCS team literally has prime Devin Hester returning all the kicks. Every time I score on offense, it's came back. And he shows a video and like, yeah, the guy's running with like 105 speed. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. It's just you guys bringing up the FCS games just made me think of that. And yeah, like College Football Lounge said, these games to start the season are great. Just to see if maybe something happens. Which, if it happens to Colorado, is going to be national news.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's hilarious though. I almost reminds me of the famous coding error because I played the original version of this game. I'm old. On my DOS computer. The original Civilization was notorious, and they kept it in all the subsequent versions, that they accidentally miscoded Gandhi, who was supposed to be a pacifist. So he's a pacifist, except when they coded his willingness to use nuclear weapons, they accidentally made it stack, whatever you call it, stack overflow, so that it went to the maximum level of willingness to use nuclear weapons. So did they accidentally make the FCS teams like unstoppable? Like we'll rank them really low, and somebody actually did the math wrong, so it just rolls over to the top.
Wow, we are all. I know I didn't play, but I know about Killer Gandhi.
Nuclear Gandhi, man, unstoppable. The merciless. There have been some hilarious web comics about that. Like, if you learn history from the Civilization games, you have a very different perception of dealing with Mahatma Gandhi. My goodness. I'm going to just quickly kind of come in at almost an hour and 20 minutes. I'm just going to go over a couple other quick headlines. So, Colorado State's head coach Jay Norvell. I love it. Now we're getting the people. It started to happen in previous years, but he says his quarterback Braden Flower Nicolosi, who is a promising quarterback, I should say, he received a $600,000 offer from K-State to enter the transfer portal. Like, that is straight up. I can't remember the last time somebody just straight up named the other team. I've heard them say, like, hey, other schools are offering it. And they usually know, but they keep that a little close. But man, they naming names here. Dennis Dodd, who is the CBS's main national reporter, good guy to talk to. I just want to say that I've talked to him several times, but he tweeted something that some people definitely have some problems with, because he said Mountain West interest in Oregon State and Washington State is waning. And if that's the case, where do the Beavs and Cougs end up? I'm not sure. I think that's just, quite honestly, that's just saber rattling from all sides, because of the way things are going, what we know, just to reiterate, Oregon State and Washington State have 2 seasons basically to figure something out. The NCAA said, you can't have a 2-team conference, but this is an exceptional circumstance, so we'll let you guys slide by on this. The money that they got from the other teams basically gives them enough funding to operate for 2 more seasons. But I respect Dennis Dodd. I don't think that if things came to a head, the Mountain West wouldn't want to at least talk to them in some way, at least some of the teams. Maybe it's a conference. I don't know who his quote was on there. We'll leave that there. Obviously, right now, just as kind of wrapping up some of this news, we saw some of the they're now able to use tablets and other kind of electronic devices on the sidelines officially. So now we're seeing some product wars, so to speak. The SEC and ACC will be using Apple. The Big 12 will be using Microsoft on the sideline. I know we're able to talk quite a bit about what's going on with Nick Saban's credential thing. Just to reiterate some of the points I thought that were interesting from Greg Sankey's speech at the SEC Media Day. He's definitely, we're hearing what we expect from a conference commissioner. They're happy with 16 teams. Things are good. We're not, really, if you want to look at what he said, he's like, we don't want to get involved in this. We don't want to be entangled in litigation, which is certainly a comment to what's going on in the ACC right now. This kind of goes to those earlier comments that, that were reported today, that, the FSU and Clemson are seen as potentially problematic partners. If they get out, we'll see how people really feel about it. But again, all credit to Brett Yormark and company, because they have put out there that the Big 12 is absolutely looking forward to having them in the conference if they become free. And certainly, I know that Sankey commented again on the concept of private equity. That isn't the only variation of this particular financial model. Obviously, the other one is sort of an investment model where there isn't necessarily equity, although that seems to have fallen by the wayside. Certainly, Yormark, it's almost a shot across Yormark's bow, because Yormark has been very open about the idea that they're willing to consider it and potentially propose it to the universities, and obviously they would have to agree to it. But Sankey said that there are ideas being sold or pitched to quickly somehow resolve college athletic issues, but he says there is no easy button in all of that. I'm amazed we didn't at all so far in an hour and 20 minutes have any. Oh, well, actually, maybe we'll have it now. But Ski Master Murphy, are you going to ask about what's going on with those Georgia drivers on the Bulldogs team, or is this a different topic?
No, I was going to say on this conference realignment topic, I didn't want to disparage those young men for their ill-gotten actions, even though me and a coworker were talking earlier today about Georgia football players and they might be involved in what they call the highway takeover. But I'm going to say on conference realignment, I was just going to say all this conference realignment that you were just talking about and thinking about things going on just reminded me that this time last year, it's the funniest thing to come out of all of this, that this time last year, San Diego State was like blowing kisses to the Mountain West, being like, hey,
Yes.
I'm leaving. I'm going to the Pac-12. See you later, losers. You guys have fun. I don't know what you guys are going to do being broke, but I'm going over here to where the money's at. And like the difference 1 year makes in that literally them staying in the conference actually put them in a better position. It's hilarious. It's all of this is flowing so fast and going everywhere, but that's the one story I think still escapes everyone. Like there was a whole team basically saying, we're gone. Not a coach, but a whole program saying, we're gone. See you later, losers. And the place we tried to go, like, just burned down in front of everyone.
And as I mentioned before, that's the second time it's happened to San Diego State. They tried to leave for the Big East, back in the day. And Boise State was going to join them, and TCU had even made the graphic. I remember the TCU graphic showing the Big East logo, and then the Big East kind of blows up, and obviously evolved into the American. So it's not the first time, and famously, that last time when they were supposedly going to the Big East, Boise State had San Diego State's back in letting them back in. I remember the report that kind of went through that. So you got to love this drama. John, I see your hand up.
Yeah. Speaking of the Georgia players and somehow not obeying the rules of the road, I think the best related tweet I think I saw about it was someone talking about the new game. He said, "This game blows. I started a dynasty of UGA and I've done nothing but bail kids out of Clark County jail for 2 hours."
I saw that. No, I mean, my goodness, couldn't they have like a Need for Speed section in the game, like a side quest, or something like that, or
I mean, it's one. Sorry, I was gonna say this is one of the biggest college football programs in the country. They don't have anyone that can just like drive these kids around. Like there's got to be something you can do to get these guys off the road at least for a couple months in the off season.
This
Yeah,
is
I
what
know we
happens when you
touched.
give every
Go ahead.
So this is what happens when you give every 5-star a Hellcat.
Well, and here's the thing too. I love that somebody talked to Carson Beck about that, and he's like, because he drives actually a Lamborghini now, an SUV, and he's like, I don't like fast cars, but I like cars. And it's like, says a Lamborghini owner, was the comment that I saw that popped up on Reddit. But I mean, yeah, I get it. I the only thing that came, and this was interesting, and I can't remember if this came out specifically from his speech, but I know Kirby Smart said their collective. Well, he phrased it incorrectly, but I get the gist of what he was saying. The Georgia collectives are fining players for driving. You can't technically fine someone in that context. I mean, that's a lawyer in me, and I was glad to see it was clarified elsewhere that basically they're withholding money. Although still, I mean, like what, $5,000 out of $95,000? These kids are just, I mean, again, I'm happy for them overall. I think this is great, but I mean, that's a small dent, in perhaps what they're bringing in. I'm a little shocked at how much is happening at one school, especially a school that had an incident that obviously had cost someone's life. In not that was it last season, a couple of seasons ago, and obviously we had that. That player who was just drafted onto the Vikings, and a couple of his former teammates, all of three were past college football players, die in another crash recently too. So I don't want to make light of it. Certainly, you don't want to do what Mike Gundy did. That's why sometimes speaking extemporaneously at a very planned media event isn't great. But what Ollie Gordon, did again was a shame as well. But yeah, what's happening at Georgia though is it's hard not to notice. I mean, I believe the Atlanta Journal-Constitution noted that there have been 24 incidents. There have been 24 incidents in which this is from, I believe, Stuart Mandel tweeted this out. Yeah, so 24 incidents in which an individual associated with Georgia football has been apprehended by police for speeding, reckless driving, or DUI since the high-speed alcohol-related crash that killed 2 people in January 2023. So that is a pretty high ratio. I am usually a person that says college football players as a whole, if you do the demographics, if you do the numbers, commit crime at a much lower rate than I think most groups. I think there's like 40,000 college football players at all given levels. If you actually crunch the numbers, it's not a high ratio of crime that happens. But this is wow, this is something else. And hopefully they can corral that. I'm sure the PR is getting to them at a certain point though. I know we touched a little bit as we kind of wrap this up on Penn State is going to be having their whiteout game. Sort of funny, clunky transition there. Penn State is having their whiteout game against Washington this season, so that'll be fun. It'll be an experience for the Huskies. I have to say, we sent our media member, and I know a couple of other people who were at that wonderful after hours with Beeves and Cougs presented by the Pac-12, and Commissioner Teresa Gould, I thought, stole the show with that quote that we are, because they had an open bar. They straight up had an open bar. They held it at the Bellagio, which was where the media for the Big 12 was being held. And they said, we are drinking tonight. If anyone has had a right to drink, it is the Pac-12. Good on you, Commissioner Gould. That is a quote. That is absolutely a quote. I am all for that. Absolutely. Don't go crazy, but have fun. And as I believe Ski Mask mentioned, the Pac-12 has agreed to basically their teams will remain tied into the Pac-12 bowls for the 2024 and 25 season. That was an issue that came up early on because the bowls were threatening to sue because the bowls existence is based on being able to lock in teams. They don't want to get into some weird knife fight over the dregs that are left over in a particular season. And with, on short notice, they're stuck with this, half the teams are in the case of the Pac-12, all the teams but two have left. So they for this season, again, they will be basically able to then pick from those former teams. Again, this was a tweet from Stuart Mandel. In other words, the Alamo Bowl, which was a Pac-12, can still take Washington. The Citrus Bowl, which is a Big Ten, cannot. And then again, that was credited to Brett McMurphy initially breaking that particular news. Ski Mask, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I noticed a particular writer in the crowd and wanted to see if you wanted to come up and talk about him being harassed for a whole summer about a video game.
I didn't want to bother Matt, but I see him in the audience. If he wants to come up, by all means, we'll be happy to have you up here. Just hit request. I will let you up here, and I know there'll be a very receptive audience for you, but I don't like singling people out necessarily if they just want to chill and kind of do work in the background.
Yeah, no, I was going to give him a shout out for, being a very good sport and very great reporting for something that apparently a lot more people wanted than expected. So
yeah, this has been a delight. I mean, I have to give them credit. The rollout of this has been absolutely magnificent. As a person who, again, as I've joked, I used to play the college football game. I have all the Genesis versions of the original EAs in my cabinet somewhere because I'm of that vintage. It's been a delight to watch this. I still remember I was studying the bar, studying for the bar, and I remember I was so thrilled that they put a USC player on the cover of that edition of NCAA football. I remember I bought it and accidentally left it where we were studying for the bar. I don't know why I brought it with me, and I think I was kind of bored studying for the bar, but I passed it. If somebody had put it back where I was sitting the next day because they had seen that I'd left it. So again, pay it forward, people. That was one of those fun moments that I remember. I'm going to go ahead and slowly wrap this up with a couple more bits of, James Madison got their official letter from the NCAA that they are now full FBS members. They tweeted that out. I thought that was really cute. Again, right in time for your NCAA football game playing. And then, the SEC was asked, because I remember at the event that Texas held on July 1st, announcing that, hey, we're arriving into the SEC. Somebody even asked Greg Sankey whether horns down was going to be a penalty in the SEC. He's like, come on, man. I'm not going to talk about this here. They just joined the conference. Well, we finally have more of an answer because the SEC football officials were asked about this. And they said the horns down, it's just going to depend. And it's a logical approach. Basically, if somebody scores a touchdown and does a horns down, like towards the crowd, just kind of a celebratory thing, not a huge deal. But if you tackle somebody and then kind of horns down at them while they're on the ground, that's just a taunting penalty. So, you know what? That's logical. I think most people are going to be okay with that. It doesn't feel like we're angering Sam. Was it Sam Ellinger who was the one who complained about that years and years ago about what had happened at West Virginia? But horns down is back, baby. It's back because they were like, look, we have to deal with the gator chomp. We got to deal with all these other things. Like, come on, guys. We got other things. We got other fish to fry. But this has been a great conversation. It's always nice talking to all of you. We talked a little bit about the game. We talked about lots of things. This has been a good one. So thank you, John. Thank you, College Football Lounge. Thank you, Ski Mask Smurfy, and everyone else. I know the Aggie Football 2019, as well as several others who were up here. It's always great talking to you. So my name is Bobak Ha'Eri. I'm part of the group that runs RCFB. I usually run our media stuff, so I'll be at Big Ten Media Days myself next week. So next week, this will be from probably my room in Indianapolis. If you like my voice, want to hear it more, I do the College Football Survivor Show for Advanced Media with CBS Sports' Shahan Jayaraja. It's more focused on who's going to make the 12-team playoff, and that is exciting in and of itself. But if you missed the beginning, this automatically turns into a recording. I'll get this to wherever you listen to your podcast as RCFB Talk. Again, thank you all for joining. Now I'm going to hang up and listen.